This is IndyCar Radio on the INS Radio Network.
The car comes to a stop just a few feet short of the start-finish line. Emo raises his hands as if to say, I can't believe what has happened. We are 16 laps away from the finish of the 500, and Emerson Fittipaldi is sitting here with the car stalled in the middle of the racetrack without a rear wing.
Dario Franchitti watches Sato spin and hit the wall behind him on the final lap of the race. He and his teammate will cross the yard of bricks. Side by side, the fist pumping. They are side by side. Elio looks to the outside. Elio will have to take the number 2 spot. He's right on the rear wing of Brian Hunter Ray.
Hunter Ray looking for number 1. Elio Castroneves looking for win number 4. Ryan Hunter Ray, 8 car lengths in front as they're moving the backstretch for the final time.
And Elio makes the move 3 laps too early. Does he have anything at all left in the tank? A couple of turns to go.
AJ and Ari just got into a bit of a scuffle. AJ kind of pushed him out of the way. Vince, back to you.
Well, AJ Foyt just struck Ari Leyendijk. Ari came into the winner's circle claiming to have won the race, and there was a scuffle that broke out, and as Ari walked away, AJ backhanded him upside the head and knocked Ari to the ground. And now the security has come in, and they're separating the two sides, and it has certainly spoiled this victorious scene here in Winner's Circle.
Yes, we can. Davey Hamilton, I'm walking towards Victory Circle with a little scuffle breaking out between A.J. Foyt and Ari Leyendijk. But let's talk about Davey Hamilton, a model of efficiency. I know you'd like to get in Victory Circle, but a second-place finish, you'll take it.
Yeah, you know, I tell you what, I gave it all we had. We were wide open the whole way around that place. And how anybody went faster, I don't know, because I had the throttle down. I don't know if we were down on power, just too much downforce or what we had. But we only had enough for second. We'll take it.
And I'll tell you what, you hate to win points championships under adverse circumstances with injuries and whatnot. That is part of the sport, but you're poised now to maybe stake your claim to a points championship.
Well, you know, that's what we want. We'll try to win that points championship. And it was unfortunate that Mike Groff broke his leg, because he's a great racer and a great competitor. And I'd rather win the championship with everybody here and everybody well and going and earn it. But it's unfortunate for Mike. But, you know, like I said, I just got to look forward and try to win this thing.
Going to help Billy Boat celebrate a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely have to. You know, he did a great job, and you know, my hat's off to him. Obviously, I wanted to be in Victory Circle, and he's a hell of a driver, man. His second race in IndyCars and put in victory lane, and you know, it's too bad for Scott Sharp. I know he's got to feel bad, you know, because that's his car, and he's a great race driver, and I'm sure he feels he could have been there as well, but he'll be back.
This is the Verizon IndyCar Series on the Advance Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network.
A.J. Foyt down the main straightaway. The checkered flag is out. A.J.'s hand in the air. He is the winner. A.J. Foyt at Indianapolis has won his 4th 500-mile race. A.J. Foyt, our winner. The flag will fly now for Tom Sneva and then for Al Unser. We will be talking with all of these drivers in just a moment. Lou Palmer is in victory lane as A.J. Foyt takes now his victory lap around the 2.5 miles of Indianapolis. A record-breaking end to a record-breaking month. A.J. Foyt, the 4th win at Indianapolis. A month that saw the 200-mile-an-hour barrier broken, not just in the practice where it is unofficial, but in the qualifying by Tom Sneva, our second-place car at the moment. And then, too, the first woman to enter, to qualify, and to compete in a 500-mile race, Janet Guthrie of New York City. But for the moment, the name is A.J. Foyt of Houston, Texas. The car is his, a Coyote. The engine is his, a Foyt V8. And happiness, fame, and fortune are his, too. He is the winner of the 61st running of the Indianapolis 500. Pat Sedan continues to display the checkered flag to the 11 other cars running on the race course at the moment. They hand him now the red flag. He will use that in just minutes to stop the race, to bring the cars into the pits. The 500-mile race is complete. The checkered flag and the red flag are waved together. And the checkered flag was displayed first here for A.J. Foyt. He is now on the pit lane. The people are moving out to his car as he comes down through the pits. A very elated crew has begun to run toward victory lane to meet A.J. and to meet Lou Palmer. A.J. cruises through the pit area very, very slowly toward the new victory lane in the front of the master control tower here. Ever so slow he comes down. But A.J. Foyt no longer has need for the speed of that V8 Coyote engine. He is the winner here at Indianapolis. And now to interview the winner of this year's Indianapolis 500 here in Victory Lane is Lou Palmer.
And we await A.J. Foyt along with a host of others, including Tony Holman, who was cheering as loudly as the crowd. We've seen what has never been seen before, beginning with a woman driving in the field in the morning and A.J. finishing 4 up front at Indianapolis. Headed into victory lane now, A.J. Foyt in the gleaming Gilmore 14 Coyote, the Gilmore Racing Team home, and he wins again.
It's race day, 1980. The place is the world's greatest race course, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This is the 64th running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of spectators file into this giant and ancient speedway. As the sun began to light the eastern sky early this Indiana morning, aerial bombs shattered the stillness of the dawn and signaled the opening of the gates. For over 5 hours now, the crowd has poured through those gates. Before the green flag falls, in just over 40 minutes, the crowd is expected to swell to well over 300,000. Each year, these fans make their pilgrimage to the center of Indiana. They come from around the world. They are joined in heritage only gained by almost 7 decades of history. Many of these fans wear the bright colors reflected by the cars driven by their favorites. The grandstands, stretching for miles, are a kaleidoscope of bright color. Their spirits are high. They're here to open a new decade of racing at Indianapolis. This day is bright and blue. The temperature is 74 degrees. The forecast is for clear and sunny weather. Seconds ago, you joined race fans around the world. At this moment, the sounds of Indianapolis beam out from transmitters across the United States. Shortwave transmitters and satellites fling our words across the oceans and around the globe. You join us in a singular experience. The world's largest radio network combines you, the race fan from afar, with those gathered here at the Speedway. I'm Paul Page, and I'm proud to serve you once again as the voice of the 500.
Less than half a lap ago. Gordy Johncock by 5 car lengths over Rick Mears. They're in the north short chute. Here they come. This is the final quarter lap. Johncock maintains the lead. The voice of the 500, Paul Page. Who's going to win?
Gordon Johncock off the 4th turn. Mears is right behind him. Johncock. Mears makes a try. Johncock wins it by less than 1/10 of a second. Gordon Johncock has won his second 500. Rick Mears comes across in second place, almost side by side. And you should see the celebration that is taking place in the Patrick Racing pits. An incredible celebration now as they run down toward victory lane. What a finish.
Let's see what happens with the 68.
He's going to climb the fence.
He is out of the car, and Helio Castroneves climbs the fence in the front straight.
IndyCar Radio on the IMS Radio Network. IndyCar Radio on the IMS Radio Network.
Sebastian Bourdais took a look to the outside of Ryan Hunter-Reay, but Ryan Hunter-Reay shut the door. Ryan Hunter-Reay already leads this field. Everybody safely through turn number 1 in Long Beach.
Yeah, guys, we got both 6th and 5th place in. Mike Conway all the way down to 21st. A little problem with the front left. Elio Castro-Neves also down and away. 2 good stops. Let's go down to Nick Yeoman. Yeah,
From Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth, Texas, this is the Verizon IndyCar Series on the Advance Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network.
Thank you for your patience. We've been waiting patiently as well for Mother Nature to cooperate. Some pretty sizable storms snuck up on us during the overnight hours, lingered through mid-morning, but everything is clean and green and dry under an overcast sky. Now, we expect this to be the only troublesome day. We're actually hopeful the rest of the day will be uneventful in terms of weather, and then it will be more Texas-like for us throughout the day, and then tomorrow night when we get ready to go racing here at the Rain Guard 600. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark James. Happy to be joined high atop the start-finish line. Well, just past it, in fact, at the setup of turn number 1. Happy to be joined by Nick Yeoman. And Nick, a little adjustment to the schedule today, but we're still hopeful that we're going to get everything in, beginning with this practice session that's scheduled to run until 2 o'clock.
Yeah, 2 practice sessions and 1 qualifying session on tap here. As you mentioned, everything pushed back a little bit. This practice session looks like it's going to run right at about an hour. 2 o'clock Eastern time is when this practice session is scheduled. 2 o'clock local time is when this session is scheduled to end. So these teams, Mark, are going to get about 1 full hour of work here at Texas Motor Speedway. As you mentioned, qualifying a little bit later, and then just a half hour of happy hour after qualifying. So with this short turnaround time, Mark, this is going to be an interesting practice session because with qualifying just around the corner, the last thing you want to do is tear up a race car. You want to work in some race simulations because this is the longest practice session. So just 1 hour for these teams to work with, but they've got a lot of work they want to get done.
And this is not, I guess, quoting your dad's Texas Motor Speedway.
Right.
Some work done during the offseason, changing the configuration a bit. We'll get more on that in just a couple of minutes. Perhaps, Nick, no driver more anxious to get to the racetrack than the guy who swept the doubleheader weekend in Detroit, Graham Rahal. And, oh, by the way, he won here last year.
Yeah, by just a handful of inches and a thriller. Of course, that race rained out and moved to later in the summer. And, boy, what a show the last 10 or 15 laps we saw with Graham Rahal going to victory lane here at Texas Motor Speedway. They were going 2 wide, 3 wide, 4 wide at one time down the back straightaway, and Graham picked up a thrilling win. And then, as you mentioned, Mark, the story of IndyCar here over the last couple weeks has been just that. Graham Rahal and his resurgence. It's been kind of a disappointing season up until last weekend at the doubleheader of Detroit. And, boy, Graham Rahal showed up. Nobody had anything for him. Won from the pole in race number 1, and then from third in race number 2. It was an impressive weekend, Mark. It was a weekend that I think that entire Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan team really needed. And now, all of a sudden, Graham Rahal finds himself in the midst of a points championship. Mark, he jumped from 15th all the way to 6th, just 52 markers back of points leader Scott Dixon. So that was a monster weekend for the American driver.
To your point, 17th, 10th, 13th, and 21st through the first 4 races, 6th at the Indianapolis Grand Prix. Disappointed with that 12th place finish at Indy, but then went into Belle Isle with a vengeance, back-to-back wins. Driver changes to talk about this weekend. Some teams returning and a driver returning to the Verizon IndyCar Series. With more on that, we welcome in Jay Query.
Thank you, Mark. Couple of notes here first off before we talk about exactly that. It is 85 degrees here, or excuse me, 74 degrees here is the ambient temperature. The track temperature is 85, so you can feel the thickness in the air, a little bit sticky. You wonder how that might just kind of affect, if you will, those Chevrolet and Honda engines as they work their way through a more humid air here in Texas. But as you had mentioned, we don't anticipate weather being any sort of a factor here the remainder of the weekend. One thing that was a factor for the youngster Esteban Gutierrez, who, of course, was piloting that number 18 machine for Dale Coyne Racing and did so after Detroit, but then it was determined there was a bit of an issue, if you will. He's never been on an oval before, and the problem was just because of the condensed and collapsed schedule between races, there wasn't sufficient track time to get him out and get him used to what you deal with here at Texas Motor Speedway. Now, I know it would be easy for someone to say, what about Fernando Alonso, who had not been on an oval before Indianapolis? But keep in mind, Alonso had extensive private testing and then also an entire week's worth of practice to get acclimated to the feel of those race cars. It was not, of course, conducive for Gutierrez to be able to do that from a scheduling standpoint. So he was not, by IndyCar, cleared, if you will, to drive in this race. So Dale Coyne Racing for number 18, of course, that car became available after the accident with Sebastian Bourdais that has put Sebastian Bourdais, from a health standpoint, out for the year. We would expect to see him next year. But it's the Frenchman, the countryman of Sebastian Bourdais, Tristan Vautier, the 2012 Indy Lights champion, that will be in the car. He has, of course, run as recently as 2015 with Dale Coyne, so he is a veteran of the series. Talked to him this morning. He was excited about getting in the car, getting a feel once again and getting reacclimated here to this very fast oval. He sits right now inside that number 18 machine. And Mark, one thing you could say about Dale Coyne, whether it be Ed Jones, of course, or at this number 18 machine, they're going to have fast race cars. You can expect that Tristan Vautier is going to have a very good car here this weekend.
11 starts for Dale Coyne in 2015. Nick, 30 starts overall, a top 5, 4 top 10s. He led a couple of races for a total of 12 laps. And, bottom line is this. The guy's been running sports cars, very likable guy, and he's a guy that at times was very, very racy after his successful climb to the series, especially in Indy Lights.
Very comparable driver. Will do a good job. Will take care of that race car. A former Indy Lights champion. I think it's a good call, Mark, by Dale Coyne to put Tristan Vautier in that car. I think he'll take care of it. He's got some experience. I think it was a smart move.
Well, talk about smart moves. Every time we come to Texas, we bring this guy on board to join us on pit road. Of course, we worked together during the Brickyard 400 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as a show on Sirius at XM, and also a member of the Performance Racing Network, a member of this radio network. When we get here to the Lone Star State, we welcome in Brad Gilly. Hello, Brad.
Well, hello, Mark, and thank you for a wonderful introduction. As you know, I always love hanging out with my friends from the IndyCar Radio Network. This is a lot of fun here for sure. And right now, I'm actually here in the infield hanging out with one of my former co-workers and friends here at Texas Motor Speedway, because as everyone knows, last time we were here at Texas, the track looked different. It had different, older asphalt on it, and it even had a different configuration in turns 1 and 2. And from the Texas Motor Speedway Communications Department, Lewis Moore is here to tell us a little bit more about that. Lewis, first of all, thank you for having us here. We always love being here with IndyCar, but what went on with this racetrack here during the off season?
Well, as all your IndyCar fans know, it took 76 days from green flag to checkered flag with the dealing with rain. And obviously, we didn't want to do that to the fans again. So what we did is we had an extensive project during this off season where we installed an extensive French drainage system, and we also did a little more by lowering the banking in turns 1 and 2, going from 24 to 20 degrees of banking. Going to create for some exciting racing here Saturday night here for the Rain Guard Water Sealer 600. Present a challenge to these drivers. This April they had a chance to test it, and unfortunately we had to test the French drainage system this morning with the rain, but they're on track and ready to go, and we're ready for an exciting race weekend.
Now, when NASCAR was here, we saw much higher speeds. In fact, Kevin Harvick won the pole at nearly 200 miles per hour. IndyCar did do a very extensive test session a couple of days after that. What are we seeing from the IndyCars? What have you heard from some of the teams between the test session and maybe this weekend, Lewis?
I know they mentioned a lot about the tire degradation not being as much, seeing that it's a smooth surface. So we should see some tight racing throughout the race. A lot of them praised it, saying that there's going to be a lot of action going 2 wide, hopefully 3 wide. So we did get a lot of positive feedback from that test.
And I think if I remember correctly, during Media Day, Graham Rahal was even thinking maybe we could get 5 wide in 1 and 2 because the track not only has less banking there, but it's a much wider racing groove, correct?
Absolutely. We went from 60 degrees of racing surface previously to 80, expanding it to, as Graham mentioned, potentially going 5 wide. So, again, just some exciting racing that we're expecting Saturday night. Really looking forward to it.
All right, thank you, Lewis.
Thank you.
80 feet wide in turns 1 and 2, guys. What do you think about that?
5 wide, Brad. We wouldn't mind calling that. That's for darn sure. And Nick, Brad and I had an opportunity to walk down toward turn 1 this morning after the rain had stopped while the track drying was underway. And as they mentioned, essentially, pit exit is that's where the most noticeable change is. But it is a long way from top to bottom on that racetrack.
I think the thing that I noticed when I got up here is it kind of reminded me of Kentucky Speedway, and I looked at it. The 1 and 2 is banked at 17 degrees at Kentucky, a little like Chicagoland as well at 18 degrees. So it is. It's very wide. It's flattened out a little bit, and it's remarkable, Mark, when you look from our vantage point to the right to see turns 1 and 2, how wide and laid down it is, and then in turns 3 and 4, where you could really only get about 3 racing grooves at the most. We've seen them try to get 4. It has made this racetrack, Mark, super unique, and I think it's going to make for exciting racing. We've already seen here in practice session these guys mixing it up quite a bit. Just about, it looks like only about 5 or 6 cars on pit lane. So a busy practice session so far. But I've been impressed, Mark, so far with this new redesign, this layout of turns 1 and 2 here at Texas Motor Speedway. It looks fast, it looks exciting, and boy, it looks wide. And you know these race car drivers, if you give them a lane, they're going to take it. So we'll see. I think it's going to make for some great racing on Saturday night.
Hey, let's welcome back Gabby Chavez and Harding Racing. The 88 entered into the race this weekend after starting 25th at the Indianapolis 500. A top 10 finish for Gabby Chavez. Good to see Harding Racing back on track this weekend.
Yeah, what an awesome story. Mike Harding and Larry Curry putting that deal together with some help from Dreyer Reinbold. And Mike Harding kind of told Gabby Chavez, hey, you take care of that race car. We'll see if we can run a couple more races in 2017 at Texas and then at Pocono. And boy, Gabby took care of the race car. Not only did that, but as you mentioned, brought that car home in a top 10 position for a debut. It doesn't get much better than that. So Gabby's a likable guy, a former Indy Lights champion, is going to do a great job. And then, Mark, Jim Aiello from the Indianapolis Star had a story this week about that Mike Harding and that Harding Racing team, their plans for 2018, they want to go full-time. So, obviously, lots of T's to cross and I's to dot to make sure that they can get that done. But, boy, that is what this sport needs. Some new, fresh owners, new blood getting involved in the series. And to give a young guy like Gabby Chavez another opportunity, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, believe it or not, I won't say it's the silly season yet, but let's face it, it may start earlier than it has in the past couple of years. And, we talked about it last year. I mean, the driver rosters were all but set, I think, before Thanksgiving, and that's a rarity. So it wouldn't surprise me that some of those rumored deals start to come together with some of the teams that have kind of dipped their toe in the water a little bit, like Harding Racing. Another guy back in the race car. He's made a couple of starts already this year. Started 21st, finished 7th at Phoenix. Front row starter again at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Came home in 11th. Horribly disappointed at that finish. I think he really expected more and really thought he had a car to give him a chance to win. But good to see Ed Carpenter back in the race car. And I know Ed loves running at Texas Motor Speedway.
Ed Carpenter, a former winner here at the Texas Motor Speedway. 3 career wins for Ed Carpenter. Kentucky in 2011, Fontana in 2012, and then in 2014, Mark, Ed Carpenter went to victory lane here at Texas Motor Speedway. Of course, this kind of transition from running full-time in the IndyCar Series as a full-time owner, part-time driver, only races on the ovals, and is still very, very competitive. As you mentioned, front row started in Indianapolis and was certainly a name that a lot of people were looking at as a guy that could win that race. That didn't happen, but for Ed, this is the first time for him to get back behind the wheel of one of these Verizon IndyCar machines since the Indianapolis 500, and I know he's awful excited to come race here at Texas.
You know, much has been made about the success of Graham Rahal at Detroit and how hot he is, but, one of the drivers that's probably on as big a role as anybody right now, of course, winning the Indianapolis 500 will do that to you.
That helps, doesn't it?
But let's talk about a very good weekend for Takuma Sato. He finished 8th in the first race, started on pole, and finished 4th in the second race. Now let's go back a little farther. His first race with Andretti Autosport, started 5th, finished 5th at St. Petersburg, 18th at Long Beach, then 9th at Barber, yellow on the racetrack. Have a car with a cut tire. Of course, they'll go out and take a look at that, see where that may have happened, do a quick track inspection. But, outside of that 18th, 16th, and 12th, all top 5s and top 10 finishes for Takuma Sato. And, Nick, he's very much in the battle of a points championship. We'll talk more about the Indianapolis 500 winner in just a moment. But first, let's go back to pit road and Jay Query.
I think few guys do a better job of just giving fans insight as to what goes on setting up these cars than Mike Hull, the managing director for Ganassi Racing, as Scott Dixon pulls his car in. Let's talk first about that, as we do with you sometimes, going from a street course now to an oval. What are the challenges just from an aerodynamic standpoint? And if it's a place like this where we've been a lot, do you come off the truck with information, or do you have to accumulate as much as you can in this session, Mike?
Well, track time here today is really important because we're on a brand new tire, first of all. We did come here and do that open test, and then Firestone, with the information they had, went away and came back with different tires. So we're working a bit on that. The track's really green because of all the rain that we had here. So kind of waiting for the track itself for the cars to find a racetrack the right way as we go through the day. So we just continue to work on what we think we know. And some of the things are very similar to Indianapolis, so it does help.
We talk about the tires themselves. Max Chilton, by the way, the one that has a cut tire right now, one of those Ganassi cars. That's why we're under caution for track inspection. In terms of the atmosphere, Mike, how much is it a factor? Look, we're used to rain here. You go back to a year ago, but that got washed out for the weekend. The air is very thick today. May not be tomorrow. How much is that a factor?
I think the air is going to be very thick tomorrow. You know, they live with humidity here on a regular basis. It's just going to be, I think, in the high 80s when we race tomorrow, so it's going to be significantly warmer, so less grip. So in our case, we're really working on race stuff already. We want to make sure we're right with that. Then we'll kind of back it up a little bit for qualifying this afternoon.
In terms of Scott Dixon himself, I know that he had the limp after the accident in Indianapolis. We saw, obviously, running 2 races in Detroit, which are pretty physically demanding. Where does he stand, do you think, just in terms of his comfort level back in that car?
Well, you know, it would be great if he hadn't flown through the air with the greatest of ease, and we'd have finished the race there, and then we wouldn't be talking about this. But we're fortunate that he's okay, and we're fortunate that the amount of mental fortitude that he has to do what he's doing. Not perfect yet, but we're getting back to perfect, and he'll give it 100% here.
Obviously, next year we're going to see a new chassis, and I would imagine that even still continuing to look at every single incident that takes place, it seems as though, Mike, and I understand it. I mean, there's some concern, obviously, from you in terms of that car getting airborne, right? I mean, I know that there's concern, but I'm just saying, you know, what kind of things can be done, I guess, to alleviate moving forward?
Well, you know, the thing is I said this the other day, safety is a case study for us. It always has been in IndyCar racing. It has been since the beginning of time in IndyCar racing, and unfortunately, the case study is all about drivers making contact with themselves, another competitor, the fence, some object that you don't want to hit. So we continue to learn the hard way. And the great thing about IndyCar racing and the people that work in it and have for years is the fact that they don't let anything get in their way, and the competitors unselfishly help. So happy about the new car, to answer your question. Happy that a lot of the safety things that we already know will be incorporated along with more. And personally, I wish they could do something about the cockpit, but that I'll probably always grind that axe for personal reasons. I think we're moving forward in the right direction with IndyCar.
Lastly, busy week for you. You going to Le Mans as well? I know that Scott Dixon has a pretty busy week planned.
Well, I love going racing. And there aren't too many weekends during our sports car series season or IndyCar season where I don't get the opportunity to go to a race. And so Le Mans, every person that's listening to this broadcast once in their lifetime, they've probably been to the Indy 500 already. They should go to Le Mans. 300,000 people there for 5 days. It's an amazing event, and don't want to miss that one.
Wish you guys the best of luck. We'll let you get back to work.
Thanks a lot.
Always a pleasure. Mike Cole, again, the managing director for Ganassi Racing, as he talks on the radio here to Scott Dixon. They have the nose of Scott Dixon's machine right now off in that front cowling. They're going to take a look at the springs. This is what often we see at the beginning of these weekends, as Mike had talked about. You go out, you get some laps under the car, then you start adjusting and tweaking that balance, getting a feel for things, and finding out also, he made a very interesting point there. Mark, we don't have the strategy, obviously, of the softer compound Firestone tires like you have in road and street courses to come into play. But when you have a new rubber compound, you want to see how that adjusts the car and the balance of the car itself, and make sure that you have the car aerodynamically set up in the perfect relationship with the grip of those tires. That's all part of what goes into this practice session here, with just about 46 or so minutes remaining, I think, in this session.
You know, Nick Yeoman, if someone were to say, what can you tell me about Mike Cole? I will always go back to a couple of years ago at Indianapolis during qualifying when they had that power plant let go. That team was back there pouring over that race car, all the pressure in the world to try to get that engine replaced. And it didn't matter. 3-4 times, I think, we went back there to the garage area. And Mike Hull, with all of that on the line, was gracious enough to share every little piece of information with us and ultimately the fans. And that told me all you needed to know about Mike Hull.
Engines have fired, and practice resumes here with about 43 minutes to go. But you make a great point, Mark. He's just a guy that gets it. He's been around this sport for so very long, and he has always been a guy that any one of us can go and talk to, whether it's on air or off air. He's going to put it in layman's terms, because I don't claim to be an engineer, Mark. I don't know the first thing about, tire pressures and downforce levels and all that. He does, and that Chip Ganassi team has for many, many years, and he's a great ambassador for the sport, and I'm with him. I'd love to take a trip to Le Mans. I think that'd be awesome sometime to get out there and see that race. But that's the type of guy Mike Hull is. If he's not here working at a racetrack, Mark, he's going to find a place to be to watch a race. And really appreciate all the insight that he's given the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network for many, many years.
Well, 3 of the 4 guys that were on our flight coming down here are at top of the timing and scoring, talking about Alexander Rossi, Graham Rahal, and Scott Dixon. Jared Hildebrand sandwiched in there P3. Pagano rounds out the top 5. Hunter Ray, Castro Neves, Kanan, Kimball, and Andretti the top 10. Aloshin, Carpenter, Chavez, Power, Hinch the top 15. Then Newgarden, Munoz, Vautier, Daly, Chilton, Jones, and company. Back to our earlier conversation about Takuma Sato. Do we think that Takuma Sato is just a mini hot streak he's on, or as his engineer and his team suggest, is he now poised to compete season long for this championship?
Boy, that's a tough question, Mark, because his history would tell us it might just be a mini hot streak, because Takuma has not always been the most consistent driver. He's always been a guy, Mark, that has high highs and has some low lows, and oftentimes has torn up some race cars. But I will say this, Takuma Sato's never had a better situation in his career, Mark, driving for Michael Andretti. I mean, the teams that he's driven for, whether it be A.J. Foyt a handful of years ago, that's one of those teams that's always kind of, just trying to keep up with the top teams in the sport. When he was driving for Jimmy Vasser and Kevin Kalkoven, I don't think anyone would necessarily label that organization as a powerhouse for the sport. Now, all of a sudden, Mark, at 40 years old, Takuma Sato is in the best ride of his career, his 8-year career in IndyCar. So it's been impressive. As you mentioned, that Indy 500 win was not a flash in the pan, because he went to Detroit the following weekend, won the pole for race 2, had a pair of top 10 finishes, and because of that, Mark, he's still right there in the points championship, third back of Scott Dixon, just 11 points back. So we'll see how it plays out for Sato, but it has been a very strong month of May and into June.
Yeah, those teams that you mentioned that he drove for before had some flashes of brilliance and some flashes of success, but in terms of a sustained effort, and again, I mean, my gosh, in the post qualifying celebration on pole, we carried it. AJ came up, congratulated him, patted him on the back. The crew was right there to thank him as well, and that tells you what his former employers think of him and the respect that they have for him. Well, we've already heard Mike Hull and others mention this new tire compound, and Brad Giller, you found someone that can tell us more about that.
I absolutely did. The chief engineer with Firestone Tires, Kara Adams, and we know the teams have a big challenge coming here with the newly configured and paved racetrack, but also the tire manufacturer Firestone as well. What all has gone into the development of this tire for this weekend, Kara?
Sure, we were here a couple of months ago with the whole series, and we actually did a tire test on the second day with a new service. So we have both the change in making and then the change of pavement, so we were able to test a few different tire constructions and configurations. We brought back a left side that's pretty similar to Indianapolis. It's got the Indianapolis stagger, so it's a larger right rear size, and it's a smaller overall stagger, about 0.33 inches between the outside right rear tire and the inside left tire. That'll help move some of the work to the right front of this tire, so it'll help with the car handling around the course. We also brought a slightly reduced gauge right side, so it'll help with heat.
I know a lot of people would hope for some tire degradation over the course of a run, but when it comes to a brand new, really smooth racetrack, that can always be a huge challenge. What is the challenge for Firestone on that?
So the interesting thing about this new speedway is every construction and every tread compound we brought had almost no tire degradation. So we might see a little bit difference this year. We might see the cars a little bit closer together as far as lap times. They're all going to be pretty even over a stint. So it's really how teams were able to use their setup to take care of that.
And how many laps do you really need to see? Will this practice session teach you a whole lot about what's actually happening now here under race conditions?
Yeah, hopefully we get some long runs. Looking at the car setups, it looks like a lot of them have qualifying trim set up, so it'll be interesting. So hopefully we'll see some good laps here.
Well, we know Firestone always does a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Kara Adams, Chief Engineer for Firestone Racing. Great to talk to her, and boy, it is a huge challenge for them to actually put together a tire that's going to work well on a new surface, but I think they're up to the task.
Yep, really good stuff, Brad, and thanks to Kara Adams for the time, because this is data gathering time for them, and Nick, and we certainly appreciate. We talked about the accessibility of my call. Thanks to Kara Adams and the whole staff at Firestone. I mean, even those folks back in the back that are mounting and dismounting the tires, headed up by Mark Williams and that outstanding crew. I mean, from just top to bottom, it's such a great relationship. We appreciate the accessibility that we have at Firestone.
Yeah, I got to meet Mark Williamson at the Indianapolis 500 during the month of May, and he kind of showed me through the process of mounting and labeling and the filing of the thousands and thousands of tires that they bring to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It is quite a process, and honestly, you know, this sport can't run on without a company like Firestone bringing great tires and all the hard work they do. Data collecting period, Mark, for Firestone, but for these drivers as well as a lot of these guys mixing it up around this mile-and-a-half racetrack here at Texas Motor Speedway. But this layout is certainly something that we're watching.
One more point about Firestone to give you an idea about the number of tires they mount and dismount. 4, right? 12 sets, 22 cars. So that tells you just how busy they will be throughout the course of the weekend. And those folks back there in the compound will touch every single one of them, most assuredly. The 36 minutes remaining in this session, that tells you it wraps up at the top of the hour. Graham Rahal shows no sign of letting up. He is P2 in this practice session. Rossi is quick at 2:21.317. Graham at 2:21.175. Dixon, Kimball, Pagano, Hildebrand, Castroneves, Kanaan, Sato, and Aloshin, the top 10 as preparation continues here at Texas Motor Speedway for Saturday night's Rain Guard 600.
The finish line. The victory lap, the trophy. I'm Mario Andretti, and I know there's nothing sweeter than winning an IndyCar race. And that feeling doesn't stop at the finish line. Because when you drive on Firestone tires, the official tire of the Verizon IndyCar series, you'll realize that you don't need a track to drive like a champion.
Whatever you drive a Firestone.
Mark James, Nick Yeoman, Brad Gilley, Jake Query, on-site engineer and producer is Rick Evans, the director of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network and the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network, Wally Levitt here. And we are going to the first practice session. Things held up a bit because of the rain, and it subsided late morning, and quick drying efforts led to this practice session, and the schedule altered a little bit. Back to the battle for the points championship. We mentioned Sato 11 points back. Is he in it for the long haul? Elio Castroneves, void of wins, Nick, but has had the most consistent season to this point. Or maybe has it been Scott Dixon? I think if it weren't for the incident at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Scott Dixon could very easily be leading the points right now.
Yeah, of those two drivers, that's what, 14 combined starts over 7 races, and the only finish outside the top 10 was that accident for Dixon in the Indianapolis 500. So it has been remarkably consistent seasons for those drivers. That points lead for Dixon, just 8 over Castroneves, 11 back to Sato. Those points leads, Mark, would be a lot bigger if either one of those drivers could find their way to victory lane, and they're two of the drivers still hungry for wins here in 2017. But, boy, Elio's been awful strong, had really good qualifying efforts at Detroit. I don't know if they necessarily hit the strategy right, and it cost them a chance to win those races, but still came home with a pair of top 10 finishes. And now, Mark, as we reach the summer stretch of the schedule, that's when we're really going to focus on this championship battle. We mentioned Dixon, Castroneves, and Sato separated by just 11 points. The defending Verizon IndyCar Series champ Simon Pagano is right there as well, 25 markers back. Joseph Newgarden is in the hunt in 5th, 44 points behind. Graham Rahal vaulted all the way to 6th, 52 markers back. And Mark, the driver who's fastest so far in this practice session, has had an awful nice season as well. That's Alexander Rossi. He's just 57 points back. So right now, Mark, there are a lot of guys that give a good week or two or a bad week or two that can rise or fall in this championship battle very easily.
Yeah, top 7, in fact, separated by 57 points, as you suggest. Will Power is a guy who can get hot like he did midsummer last year. We reeled off a couple of wins in a row. He's only 70 points back. But until Graham Rahal repeated at Detroit, we had no repeat winners. This appears to be the season of parity in the Verizon IndyCar Series.
Yeah, pretty amazing that we've had 7 different winners in 8 races, and one of them's not Scott Dixon, one of them's not Helio Castroneves, Ed Carpenter, Tony Kanaan, Alexander Rossi, all very, very strong drivers that have yet to visit victory lane. That's going to change, Mark. I think a handful of those guys will win races before this season is over. But, man, that's what's made IndyCar racing awful fun in 2017 is when we show up to a racetrack, yeah, you can label a handful of favorites, but you never really know who's going to win the races. I wouldn't have been able to pick Graham Rahal would have dominated and swept the weekend in Detroit, and I think that's what makes this sport awful cool, Mark.
You know what I think was interesting about that weekend? I mean, he had a Cheshire Cat grin on his face starting Friday morning. I mean, after the first session, he was walking around the paddock, and anyone and everyone that he had the chance to talk to, he's like, hey, we've got a shot here. And it's pretty impressive when you can back that up.
I think on these IndyCar weekends, because the schedule time is reduced, you're doing a lot of guessing. You're hoping that you hit the setup right off the truck for an opening day practice on a Thursday or Friday, and they did, Mark, and it worked out, and it turned out that they didn't have to change much on that race car, and it was fast all weekend long.
J.R. Hildebrand, Carlos Munoz running together on the racetrack. They head down the back straightaway. We'll see the 21 of J.R. Hildebrand. He works his way in traffic off of turn number 3. The 4 of Connor Daly coming to pit road. Ed Carpenter looks like he's ready to exit pit road. Mikel Aloshin, Ryan Hunter-Reay. They're running about 4 car lengths apart as they exit turn number 2. So haven't seen much in terms of testing the draft so far in this session, Nick. We've seen a few packs here and there, but that seems to break off pretty quickly.
No, but what we have seen is that, as Kara Adams talked about, there's not going to be necessarily the fall off on rubber degradation throughout the course of this weekend. And I think that means that you're going to see these cars kind of stay close together. We just saw Alexander Rossi bobble a bit in turn number 1 as he was trying to run down his teammate Marco Andretti. That allowed the 21 of J.R. Hildebrand to get a run and make a pass. So I think, Mark, what we're seeing is these cars are going to be awful tight throughout the course of the day. Helio Castroneves making his way out of turn number 4. Mark, got a gaggle of cars going into turn 1.
Yeah, Rahal, Charlie Kimball, the aforementioned Connor Daly. We were watching, as we said, Hunter-Reay and Aloshin work together. Hunter-Reay lifted a little bit to gain some separation. I think Aloshin lifted a little bit too off of turn number 2, and that allowed that pack of cars to catch up with them. Now it makes its way to the start-finish line. It sets up for 1. That's Graham Rahal, Charlie Kimball running together. Then Marco, now Aloshin, and Ryan Hunter-Reay going to go side by side.
Boy, he went to the outside to test that second groove around Aloshin and lost a ton of grip, Mark, when he couldn't make the pass. Rossi slips by. Hildebrand slips by as well. So we're seeing guys starting to test out that second groove, and if you don't have it planted and you can't get a good run, as we just saw from Ryan Hunter-Reay, that makes it awful tough to get around guys.
Under the old configuration here, and on those mile-and-a-halfs we once ran at, places like Chicagoland and Kansas and Kentucky. I know we've talked about it before, but, Nick, you didn't get the chance to watch it, and you were so young when it was going on now that you probably don't remember watching it on television. But Sam Hornish Jr., when he was running for Panther Racing, it seemed as though that he would start the very first session of the weekend, and he would just a half a groove higher. And I can't count the number of finishes that went to Sam Hornish Jr. because by the time we got to race day, he was the one guy that could go up and pick out that high groove that nobody else was comfortable running.
And, of course, these drivers are working with a brand-new green racetrack right now. With the rain that came this morning, it certainly washed a lot of rubber off of the racetrack. Not that there was really any to put on because this is the first day of a 2-day weekend here at Texas Motor Speedway. But That's a good point, Mark. Some of those drivers have a knack for this stuff. As you mentioned, Sam Hornish was one of them, of working in those grooves, and by the time that race came around, had that car right where they wanted it.
28 minutes remaining in this initial practice session. Rossi, Rahal, Dixon, Kimball, Pagano, your top five. Back to pit road and Jake Query.
You guys had mentioned tires, and Nick had just mentioned the fact that just trying to find out the tire degradation right now and exactly what's going to happen when you can anticipate these tires starting to fall off, lose a little bit of grip, and which lines might be causing that. I think that's what we're seeing here in this segment of this session. Takuma Sato just came in. They took a once-over. They took air pressure. They adjusted and got a read on all of them before sending him back out. Brian Hunter-Reay, Elio Castroneves just behind him. Keep in mind the pit stalls are in the qualifying order of the previous race. That would be race number 2 at Belle Isle. So Sato here at the front. Hunter-Reay just behind him, and Castroneves. Sato just went out. Hunter-Reay and Castroneves have come in. They're all doing the same thing, taking a look over those tires, checking a look. And I will say, guys, they look really good. Now, I'm not obviously in the car, but in terms of those that have come in, Sato, for example, the last time by, if there was wear on those Firestone Firehawks, it was not starting to show it just yet. That's why they just sent him back out.
Hinch working in the draft with Tristan Vautier. It looked like he wanted to go to the high side in turn number 1, and Tristan didn't give him a lot of room, so Hinch wisely backed out now. They're just a couple of cars getting in work right now. The other one, the aforementioned Takuma Sato, your winner of the Indianapolis 500. So, yeah, Nick, I think conventional wisdom says with about 27 minutes to go, as we go yellow quickly for a track inspection, that now is the time that teams are maybe going to look a little bit more towards that qualifying setup.
Yeah, I think with just 1 hour, you're going to kind of split this qualifying session in half. As you mentioned, we saw a lot of packs running out here at Texas Motor Speedway. And as you mentioned, with such a quick turnaround time for qualifying as the rest of the field heads back to pit lane, including James Hinchcliffe, now you're going to see those teams work. See a lot of cars up and down pit lane, Mark, that have the rear engine cowling off, maybe looking at those engines as they make final preparations to throw some qualifying setups on these race cars. And obviously one team that knows how to get it done in qualifying, Jake's most recent pole sitter, that was Takuma Sato, and you're on down in his pit lane with his strategist, Ziggy Harkis.
Indeed. Ziggy, first and foremost, I wanted to talk about Takuma himself. We were just talking about the fact that, and maybe it's taboo for me to say it around here, but this points championship, I know you guys don't want to jinx anything or look too heavily, but coming off of the Indianapolis 500, is it difficult for a driver to stay focused on the long-term picture?
I think it depends on the driver. I think that Takuma's a pretty focused individual by himself, so I think that he understands big picture really well. So I think that he sees now that if we can keep finishing races, if we have a bad race, do like a Dixon does. Dixon always seems to be able to put it together and drag something out of a bad race. That's what we need to keep doing.
In terms of this particular track, I know that, we've been talking about the fact that it's a new tire compound, essentially. What have you seen so far from these Firestone Firehawks? What have you guys been able to learn?
Well, they're always a great tire. Right now, we haven't really seen too much with them. It's a cool day, so we don't know what we're going to be stuck with when it's nice and hot. I think right now we're good. I don't see anything problems with the tire, so right now the car's okay.
I'd say in terms of the big ovals, you guys are okay based on the last performance, but we certainly wish you the best of luck this weekend.
Thanks much. We'll try and repeat. That would be really good.
It worked out, that's for sure, at Indianapolis with Takuma Sato. He wants to get back on. Sato now has pulled the car back in, but interesting to watch because Takuma Sato, as we talked about, Mark, and you heard Ziggy say it, just focused. But he was so elated after winning the Indianapolis 500, and I think that that's what so many people were happy to see for Takuma Sato. It's one of the more popular wins in terms of the paddock that I've seen during the years that I've been around the Indianapolis 500 in terms of other drivers just saying, hey, look, he's a great guy, and he was so excited, and you could see what that race meant to him. It means something, obviously, to all drivers, but to see the elation from Sato that was so pure and so raw, I think, was something that a lot of people certainly enjoyed. And it has catapulted him now, along with that pole in Detroit, right there, as you guys talked about, in the thick of things for this 27 Verizon IndyCar Series Points Championship, but a lot of racing left to do.
Well, regardless, Nick, of where you come from and your path, I mean, once upon a time, of course, Formula One was his focus for sure. But even at that, I know what some say in terms of the people that are parts of other forms of racing, and they're certainly entitled to their opinion. But almost anyone who has raced competitively at any point in their life, to be able to roll out of bed one morning and say, I won the Indianapolis 500 yesterday, has to be a feeling unlike any other in the world. And I think each driver will tell you, especially the multiple winners, the only thing stronger than the desire to win it is the desire to win it again, because you know what it means and what your life's going to be like.
And I think the cool thing about Takuma Sato winning the Indianapolis 500 is, as we mentioned, he's in his 40s, Mark, and once these race car drivers reach that crescendo, a lot of times they become used goods. We start wondering when they're going to hang it up because it's just naturally is a young man's game. We've seen it for so long. But for Takuma Sato to win the Indianapolis 500, over the age of 40, I think it meant a lot to him. This is a guy that, as you mentioned, spent many years in Formula One, but over the past decade has spent some time in IndyCar, Mark, and I think race fans have really gravitated to him. They certainly did in 2012 when he went for it at the final lap of the Indy 500, trying to get around Dario Franchitti. Handled himself well. No attack, no chance was the motto there for Sato. And for him to hang around the IndyCar Series, commit to running here and making fans and ultimately winning a couple weeks ago, I think it's been a really popular win.
Not the international impact that Fernando Alonso would have had had he won the Indianapolis 500, but certainly a boost internationally for Takuma Sato to have won the 500.
Oh, my goodness. And we've heard Taku talk about that over the past couple weeks as well. He had hoped that it would give some inspiration and a good boost for a lot of the folks still suffering from the earthquake in 2012. But he is an absolute rock star over there in Japan. I mean, if you think about it, Mark, worldwide, it's not like Japan has a large history of successful big-time racing drivers. Takuma Sato, by most people, they would account that he's the guy. I mean, he is the most successful race car driver from Japan, and certainly with an Indy 500 title now to his name, that is certainly true. So it was big for all the folks in Japan that followed along with the IndyCar Series and followed Sato's career for many years. The media contingency that's followed Takuma around for many, many years, they were fired up as well. So I think in those circles, Mark, it's been huge.
Yep, I had the honor and privilege to spend 9 days over there around the race in Twin Ring Motegi back in 2004. And some hardy race fans for sure, and they're fans of all forms of racing, no matter what it might be. Let's go back to pit road, Brad Gilley.
Mark, I want to give you a little update on the track. You know, we talk a lot about the racing surface being repaved and reconfigured, but I think one thing that is highly underrated, especially when it comes to the IndyCar Series, is the fact that the entire speedway got repaved, and that includes the aprons, and that includes pit road as well. You know, over the years here with different timing and scoring loops that have been cut onto pit road through various racing seasons, be it Series, be it IndyCar or NASCAR, the track had become a lot bumpy, especially at the exit of pit road. You used to hear a lot of IndyCar drivers complaining about that, complaining about maybe some of the bumps on the apron as they come off of pit road and try and blend with the rest of the field in turn two. Everything here now, every single surface, completely smooth with this repave, which I got to think when you're sitting that close to the ground in one of these race cars, has got to be a very nice thing for him this weekend.
Green flag. Nick Yeoman, 20 minutes remaining in this session, and we're 2:21.3. That's the number they're chasing. But don't we expect throughout the course of the afternoon that number to climb as the conditions improve? I mean, that haze is just about gone, and we're starting to get some peaks of some blue sky and the sunshine starting to take over just a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to see speeds start to pick up, times start to drop here in practice. Tony Kanaan, Connor Daly, a couple different drivers that have made their way out on the racetrack. Takuma Sato making his way into turn number 3. But as you mentioned, everyone chasing Rossi right now. He's at P1. Graham Rahal is second quick. Scott Dixon third. Charlie Kimball fourth. Simon Pagenaud fifth. Rest of the top 10, Mark, Elio Castroneves, J.R. Hildebrand, Will Power, Tony Kanaan, and the aforementioned Sato.
So now what if we end up with, because of the configuration, the aero package, the tires and whatnot, what if we end up with another race, especially over the last 20 laps or so, as we had last year when we came back here at the end of August? Let's face it, at the conclusion of that, there were some drivers who expressed some concern with racing that way. However, there were others who had done it before here, Canan, Castroneves, and Dixon, and those drivers. They seem to say, "Hey, bring it on! It's a great show for the fans." So, are we looking for a balance there, something in between? Because we've been here before when it's not been real competitive, and it came down to absolute tire degradation.
Yeah.
You remember Graham Rahal? All but had this race won, and then the tires went away, and the late Justin Wilson was able to get his car into victory lane. So, which do you think is more compelling? Which puts on the better show?
Personally, Mark, I've always been a fan of that 2x2, 3 wide. I mean, just hair on the back of your neck stands up watching these guys. That's what I've always enjoyed. That's what's made the highlight reels at Texas Motor Speedway for many, many years. But as we talked about, that takes a tremendous mental toll on these drivers, and certainly from a physical standpoint, it is very, very dangerous. I think, Mark, you got to just find that happy medium. As you talked about, the race needed a little bit of work over the last 2 or 3 years, and last year's race was just phenomenal, where I think we kind of found that balance. Now with the track changing, I think it's a whole other curveball that's been thrown these drivers' way, but I think they're going to figure it out. That's what I'm confident in. I don't think there's a correct answer, though, Mark. You got to put on compelling racing. It has to be close. I mean, they've always said as long as they're side by side, the people are going to watch, they're going to show up, and they're going to pay attention. But at the same time, at these speeds, as you mentioned, 221 miles an hour, the fastest lap so far, safety has to be paramount as well. So it's all about finding that happy medium, and I give IndyCar, the series, and the sanctioning body a lot of credit, because that's where their focus is week in, week out.
Interesting mix of winners here over the years. It's not always been those that have piled up gaudy numbers in terms of their racing career. This was the site of a win by Mark Dismore in 1999. John Paul Jr. won here for Jonathan Byrd and his family back in 1998. Billy Boat won here as well. Jeff Ward won here in 2002 driving for Chip Ganassi when Chip was still running in Champ Car. And, and then you've had the names like Gilles de Ferran and Elio Castroneves, Sam Hornish Jr., Al Unser Jr., and others win here. So, it certainly has had a storied history in terms of the top 10 finishes, but it's also a place that has been kind to guys who typically had not had maybe a tremendous measure of success elsewhere.
That Jeff Ward win is one of my favorite of all time in the Verizon IndyCar Series, Mark, because he was right there in the top 5 in the closing laps and then just kind of made his move and one by one started to pick those guys off, and then, of course, was side by side across the start-finish line picking up a win. But you're right. This is a racetrack that has certainly offered up some surprise winners over the year.
And for those of us in Central Indiana, there's a young man in the NBA down in these parts playing for the Dallas Mavericks, and he is here this weekend. Let's find out who we're talking about from jQuery.
The product of Indianapolis, Park Tudor High School, and, of course, Indiana University, now with the Dallas Mavericks. Yogi Ferrell, welcome to Texas Motor Speedway. Look, you grew up in Indy. What's your experience in watching these Indy cars? Is this a first-timer for you, or did you spend some time at the Speedway?
It's my first time ever being up this close and personal. Obviously, growing up in Indy, I knew about the Indy 500. Been to a few races before, but have never really looked at it on an inside view. So I think it'll be good to talk to Ed Carpenter. He's from Indy as well, just to pick his brain a little bit about the races and all that stuff.
Actually, you and Ed Carpenter both went to the same school, as I'd mentioned, Park Tudor. Which of the two of you is the more famous product out of Park Tudor? Who is the most famous graduate from Park Tudor?
I don't know. He's got a lot more accomplishments than me in my professional career, so I'd probably say him. Obviously, 2 different eras, but we've had a lot of great people come out of Park Tudor in the Indy area.
For you personally and the Dallas Mavericks, you found a home here. The shirt looks good on you, Dallas basketball. You got an opportunity originally with the Nets, then you end up with the Mavericks. In terms of just being able to take advantage of opportunity, did you feel that it was going to turn into the long term now that it presumably has for you with the Mavericks?
No, I felt like it kind of happened really randomly, and I knew my next opportunity was going to come. I didn't know when. I didn't expect it to be Dallas, but I just wanted to make sure I was ready for it. So I just did everything in my power to make sure I made the most of my next opportunity.
Lastly, let me ask you, in terms of being a professional athlete and watching race car drivers, is there a parallel between what you do to get ready as an athlete and what these drivers do? And perhaps, do they require more focus than people realize?
Yeah, I feel like it. In every single sport you play, it's probably differently here and there physical-wise, but it's the same thing mentally. The way you get in the zone, the way you prepare your mind to go out there and be able to compete at the highest level, it's still all the same.
We'll let you go back and enjoy it, and it's always good to see you. Best of luck this upcoming season with Dallas as well.
All right, yep, thank you.
Yogi Ferrell, park tutor in Indianapolis, and, of course, Indiana University, now point guard for the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, it's always cool, Nick, when we have professional athletes from other sports show up at a Verizon IndyCar Series event. And, of course, you know, pro athletes, no matter the sport, have a healthy respect for one another. But always cool to get their thoughts and impressions in terms of what they think of the way these guys ply their trade, for sure.
Yeah, it certainly is, and Yogi Ferrell is just a great story of talking about working hard and everything starting to pay off. Jake, touched on it very briefly there for those that maybe aren't big basketball fans. Here's a guy that had a really, really good career at Indiana University, but went undrafted, kind of floated around the NBA D-League and with the Brooklyn Nets, and they kind of gave up on him, and then he worked super hard, got an opportunity on a 10-day contract, Mark, with the Dallas Mavericks, and then he went out the following week and had some monster games of 20, 30 points and earned himself a spot. And those type of stories, Mark, and that type of effort, that goes across any type of sports. There's lots of drivers that we've seen in the Verizon IndyCar Series that, they turn that one shot into a career moment, into a career-making opportunity. And, so super cool. Great interview down there with Jake Yogi Ferrell, one of the great success stories that we've seen in the NBA over the last couple of years.
12 minutes remaining in this practice session. Charlie Kimball has gone to P1 at 221.497. Rossi now P2. Then Ray Hall, Dixon, Sato, your top five. Pagano 6th, Castroneves 7th, Hildebrand 8th, Power 9th, Carpenter is 10th, 11th, Joseph Newgarden. Tony Ganon is 12th, Max Chilton is 13th, Mikel Aloshin 14th. Then Tristan Vautier, Ryan Hunter-Ray, Munoz, Andretti, Hinch, and Jones. Chavez 21st, Connor Daly 22nd, quick as preparations continue for Saturday night's race here at Texas Motor Speedway.
During the 1969 Indy 500, Mario Andretti's crew couldn't get his tire to come off, so he had no choice but to keep driving on it. That tire held up the whole race and took Mario to the winner's circle. Right, Mario?
That's right. If it wasn't for the dependability of Firestone tires, I wouldn't be an Indy 500 champion.
Here's to making more champions with the official tire of the Verizon IndyCar Series. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
Back at Texas Motor Speedway right now, a private test session for Ryan Hunter-Ray. Nick, it appears as though that he's the only taker as we have 10 minutes remaining in this practice session.
Yeah, we see Mikel Aloshin driving down pit lane as he's going to come to the attention of that Schmidt-Peterson crew for some adjustments. But as you mentioned, Ryan Hunter-Ray, the lone car on the racetrack so far in this practice session, Mark, he's 16th fastest, so looking to find a little bit more speed. And Hunter-Ray, Mark, is another one of those guys that of the 7 winners in 8 races that has not gone to victory lane and is one of those that we expect year in, year out to be perennial favorites to win races. It's been a tough year for Ryan Hunter-Ray and looking to turn it around here at Texas Motor Speedway.
Yeah, he is currently it's unlike him. He's 13th in points, 120 points back. Marco Andretti, 121 points back. He's 14th position. Mikel Aloshin, 15th, 126 points back. I think of those three, certainly from everything that we had heard, Marco had rededicated himself, if you will, and they moved Brian Herta to his pit box. And unfortunately for Marco Andretti, a lot of the issues this year have been related to mechanical gremlins, Nick, and that's got to be awfully, awfully frustrating for that race team.
Not his fault. Isn't that what Danica would have said back in the day?
That's Nick Yeoman making that comparison, ladies and gentlemen. Nick Yeoman.
You're right. I mean, those are completely out of the driver's hands. I threw a stat out on Twitter this week, Mark, that it kind of blew me away. In the past 25 IndyCar races, Andretti Autosport's only gone to victory lane twice. And both of those happen to be the Indianapolis 500, one with Alexander Rossi a year ago and Takuma Sato 2 weeks ago. So,
5 wins as a team there now.
Yeah, it's remarkable how they've got the Indianapolis 500 figured out, but then for the rest of the season, over the last 2 or so years, they've struggled. Now, I think a lot of it had to do, Mark, in the past couple years with the struggling Honda Aero kit. But then this year, Honda's tuned those engines up. They've been running a lot better. But, boy, outside of Takuma Sato's Indy 500 win, hasn't been a whole lot to write home about for Ryan Hunter-Reay, a former champion of this series, and Marco Andretti, who is usually looking to be in contention during these races.
While the Honda power plants have been stronger, there have been some whispers of concern about their durability.
Well, and I think what we've seen, Mark, is we're in a year here in the Verizon IndyCar Series where there is an aero freeze. We're going to have a brand new race car in 2018, which we've started to see some images and some
test dates announced.
Yeah, some 3D images of those race cars, and they look phenomenal. I mean, the reviews that we've got from a lot of fans, they absolutely love them. But because we're in an aero freeze, Mark, there's not a whole lot that Honda, who we all admit was about a half a step behind Chevrolet in terms of the aero kits, there's not a whole lot they could do. So I think what we've seen, they've turned those engines up a little bit and have tried to work on finding a little bit more horsepower. It's worked. They've won races. They've been in contention. But as we saw in the month of May, and we saw it many races this year, the durability, the reliability of those engines hasn't always been there. But that's what you're going to have, and I think it's made this season very intriguing.
2-lap qualifying, we'll wait and see. Set in 2013, Will Power at 219.182, a qualifying lap. Gilles de Ferran at 222.864. We should add that prior to 2008, the starting lineup based on the faster of the two qualifying laps. Once upon a time, we did do 4-lap qualifying. Ryan Briscoe was that record holder with a 4-lap average of 215.273. Buddy Rice has the fastest race lap. That one is 222.501. And right now we look up and see Charlie Kimball at 221.497. And again, it'll be interesting to see, Nick, how the track improves as this day progresses. We thought maybe sunshine would soon fully engulf the race course, but we've not seen that yet, and again, this place is so big, you can have varying conditions at opposite ends of the racetrack, and it does seem as though that a bit more sunshine shining in the area around turn 2 and down the back straightaway, but a bit more cloud cover down the front straightaway.
From our booth high above the front straightaway here at Texas Motor Speedway, starting to see, Mark, the drivers that do go out on the racetrack try to space themselves out a little bit, and I think that shows that they're certainly trying to find some clean air to work on qualifying setups. Gabby Chavez comes across the start-finish line. Here comes one of those ABC supply cars. That's Carlos Munoz heading in to turn number 1 as he arcs it down to the bottom line through turns 1 and 2. So for a lot of these drivers, Mark, spacing themselves out. Max Chilton, Joseph Newgarden among the takers as well as they look to rip off some quick laps here for practice.
Pretty cool to be in the stockyard yesterday at Fort Worth and see Max Chilton walking around taking in the sights down there.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's always an eye-opening opportunity for even us, for Americans, to go down there. But for England's Max Chilton to head down to the Fort Worth Stockyards. Beautiful day here in Dallas-Fort Worth yesterday, Mark. We had a really good time hopping around the stockyards, as you mentioned. We did our yearly trip to Joe T. Garcia's and filled up and had a great time there as well. But, yeah, I always love coming here to Texas. And it's always cool, Mark, I think, to see these drivers. You know, they're busy. They're focused. They've got stuff to do here on these race weekends. But to get out and to explore the areas, we always enjoy it. And it's always fun to see the drivers getting out to do that, too.
So you folks that might be listening on IndyCar.com in Lafayette, if you see a guy bumping around town wearing a black cowboy hat, you will know that it is our very own Nick Yeoman. He purchased a cowboy hat yesterday and bought it in the stockyard, so it is the real deal, the authentic thing. I told him he couldn't wear the chaps and spurs until he got back to Lafayette. I didn't let him put those on yesterday while we were downtown. So.
Well, this is my 8th year coming here, so I thought it was finally time, Mark. I've always been jealous. Those guys look so cool with the cowboy hats.
Yeah.
And, I thought I'd look kind of goofy, but the more I wore it yesterday, I got to be honest, I think I'm cowboy hat guy. I think that's going to become my thing. I'm going to wear it around everywhere we go. There's, those guys that have their things. So, I went down and bought a cowboy hat. Spent a lot of money on it, Mark. Spent $20. So it's one of the nice ones. But, no, it was fun to buy a black cowboy hat. Didn't wear it to the racetrack. Don't think that'll work well in the rain. But,
no,
hey, you got to fit in.
We didn't stay for the cattle drive. We missed it by about 35, 40 minutes or so because we had some other sightseeing stops to make. But
you told me, you said a handful of years ago you guys went to the rodeo down in Stockyards, right?
There's a rodeo down there at the arena. That's always enjoyable to see. And, again, lots to see and do here, not just in Fort Worth, but obviously in Dallas. And we always look forward to coming and taking in the sights and sounds of this beautiful area down here. 3 minutes remaining in this session. Charlie Kimball continues P1, and you talk about guys that are looking for a little momentum that really need a good finish and a good, strong run this weekend. This will, I think, buoy his confidence quite a bit. Nick, he currently sits 19th in points. It's been a struggle for Charlie Kimball this year.
A pair of 8th-place finishes in Phoenix and in the second race last week at Detroit, really the only bright spot for Charlie Kimball. He's a guy that Mark, over the last 3 or 4 years, has always come to the month of May at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and whether it be in the Grand Prix or in the 500, has had some remarkably good runs. That wasn't the case this year, as Charlie was 21st in the Grand Prix and a very disappointing 25th place finish in the Indy 500. So, it's been a frustrating season for Charlie Kimball so far. So I think to see that 83 car at the top of the scoring pylon, if it can stay there here with 2.5 minutes to go, that'll be a nice confidence booster for the Californian Charlie Kimball.
Yeah, a lot of finishes in that 20th range for sure. How about Scott Dixon? We've not talked much about him. Jake Query did with Mike Hull of Target Chip Ganassi Racing, and we mentioned, if not for the incident at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, he was the pole sitter, by the way. My goodness, where do you think we might be in terms of Scott Dixon in this points championship? He's right in the middle of it. And even Ziggy Hargis with Andretti Autosport put it best. And I think maybe those that have been around this series for a while, especially the competitors, know there's a bit to be concerned about when it comes to Scott Dixon, because if there is one thing that I have noticed about him in the years that I've had the privilege of covering one of the greatest of all time, is that if he doesn't have the car to win, he still finds a way to get in on the podium or at least into the top 5 and has a way of piling up points with a race car even when it's not good enough to win.
He is the gold standard right now. I think there's no doubt about that. With Dario Franchitti retiring a few years ago, Scott Dixon is the gold standard in the Verizon IndyCar Series. And as you mentioned, making the most out of those bad days and soldiering home to good finishes. That's what wins you championships. So, it's been remarkable. We as you mentioned, we flew out with Scott Dixon. Still got a crutch, and he's got a limp, and he is playing hurt here right now in the Verizon IndyCar Series. But he is still one of the best in the sport. And, Mark, I don't care how damaged and hurt that left foot is. Scott Dixon didn't show any ails in Detroit, and I wouldn't expect him to slow down at all here at Texas.
Well, first win at Nazareth in 2001. He goes to P1, by the way, late in the session. Just 30 seconds left. 40 wins, 26 poles, 93 top 3s, 137 top 5s, 195 top 10s. He's led 130 of his 278 starts. And very, very soon, who knows, maybe this weekend, Nick, he will go over 5,000 laps led in his career. And, oh, by the way, in 278 races, 232 times he has finished the race or been running at the finish. That's not very many DNFs over the course of 278 starts.
We just don't see it. It seems like throughout the course of the season, there's always maybe one or two, and a lot of times it's not even his fault. The one this year is at the Indianapolis 500, where he quite literally, there was nothing he could have done to avoid Jay Howard coming back across the racetrack. So he doesn't beat himself, Mark. And in this series where everyone is so good, so talented, so fast, That's what separates the drivers from being really good and winning championships, is you can't beat yourself, you can't have an off weekend, and that's why Scott Dixon's our points leader.
Checkered flag by Tom Hansing going on 4 hours sleep. He was flagging a race in Indiana last
Was he really? Was he? Well, USAC Indiana Midget Week, I'd imagine.
Absolutely.
So.
Yep, he sure was. He's up on the flag stand for the race this
Good
weekend and had a chance to visit with him in the paddock. And yeah, busy week for him for sure. And flagged that USAC show last night and got on a plane, got held up a little bit getting here, but here he is on 4 hours sleep.
So I was going to say the rain delay was kind of a bummer for all of us, but for Tom, it probably helped him out a little bit, didn't it?
Might have worked out okay. There is the usual debrief once these sessions are over. Some have to run off for mandatory weighing. So Brad Gilly and Jay Query have set up shop on pit road. And Nick, while they're preparing, let's give folks again an idea of what the rest of this day is going to look like in terms of the schedule being altered just a little bit because of the rain that we received. We talked about sunshine starting to be more dominant here at Texas Motor Speedway, and as we speak, more and more sunshine is falling over the racetrack.
So the longest practice session of the day is now in the books. We'll look forward to qualifying. All of these times, by the way, Eastern Standard Time. That'll come your way at 4:15. Qualifying at 4:15 for the Rain Guard Water Sealers 600. That session should last about an hour, and then the final happy half-hour practice mark at 6:45 Eastern later tonight, 6:45 to 7:15, a 30-minute practice session for these teams to throw out those qualifying setups, turn their attention to getting ready for this race on Saturday night. So again, 4:15 Eastern for qualifying, 6:45 Eastern for final practice.
I think you touched upon it. What was very, very important about this session, because of the fact that it was pushed much closer to qualifying than was originally scheduled, with the exception of a couple of cut tires, a very clean, trouble-free session for these teams. That wouldn't have been that'd have been quite the daunting task if someone would have had an issue here that would have resulted in some damage.
Yeah, for sure, Mark. And as we take a look at the timing and scoring list, how about Honda taking the top 6 spots? Dixon up there at P1, Charlie Kimball, his Ganassi teammate, P2, Graham Rahal in P4, and then 3 Andretti cars, Rossi, Andretti, and Sato, 3rd, 5th, and 6th. So Honda has shown up pretty quick. And again, as we talked about, different teams have different agendas throughout this practice session. I think for most of them, though, it was a little work on race setup and then obviously try to find speed for qualifying. But that's going to make qualifying awful interesting, Mark, because on these ovals, Team Penske's been so strong. But gauging it off of this practice session, Jake Query, I think Honda's got something for him. And you're with the driver who was fastest in this practice session. That is our points leader, Scott Dixon.
223.422. They just bumped it technically, I guess, to a .43, but Scott Dixon, I'll tell you what, if the foot's sore, it doesn't appear to be the case. How are you feeling first and foremost?
Not too bad. I was pretty beat up on Monday after Detroit, just ached a lot. And Tuesday actually thought I was doing pretty well. And then Wednesday did a full day on the sim for Ford GT and obviously getting prepped for Le Mans. And yesterday didn't feel so good either. So it's okay. It kind of, goes up and down on the pain level. It's good to obviously be at an oval where you don't really have to utilize the left foot too much, compared to Detroit, especially with the doubleheader and the big braking zones there. So it's doing good, man.
Can a track change much from one year to the next, just in terms of the grip, the feel, and the acclimation to it?
Well, this track for sure, because it's totally changed. Turn 1 and 2 is 20 foot wider. It's a shorter radius or smaller radius, and 3 and 4 is pretty similar. But then you've got the surface change too, and typically a new track there'd be a ton of grip. But I think they've acid washed it too, which has taken a lot out of it. So offline can be quite slippery. So it's a different tire, somewhat running different aero configurations. Different car for us coming back this year with Honda.
Best of luck this weekend, and best of luck in Le Mans as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
That's Scott Dixon. Brad?
Charlie Kimball, second quick, and we were just talking. Your teammate Scott Dixon actually shook your car down in the test here in April. So you're finally getting some laps in the car. You were here for that test. How different is it for you down in 1 and 2?
Yeah, it's a totally different racetrack. The guys here at Texas Motor Speedway have done a really nice job. It was amazing watching it rain this morning. I thought, oh no, this is deja vu all over again. But they did a great job with the repave and the development of turn 1 and 2, but adding drainage as well for us to be able to get out and get nearly an hour of running this afternoon before qualifying was fantastic, and Firestone did a nice job learning from that test in April. So overall, you know, the two ends of the racetrack race very differently now, and I think you'll see it almost race like a short track in 1 and 2 and a super speedway in 3 and 4. Okay, a 220 mile an hour short track in 1 and 2, but it seems to race like that, at least at the moment. Hopefully we'll be able to open up that second lane. You'll see typical great Texas shootout here.
When it comes to hitting your marks, you know, I don't know what kind of character was on the track before that you would maybe feel this bump and do this. And now it's a brand new smooth racetrack. Are you having to find a whole new set of marks that you need to hit, and how hard is that to do?
Oh, yeah. You definitely feel a little lost the first time you go out there, especially turning into 1 and 2. By decreasing the banking, they've made it so much wider. So it feels like you're driving into a parking lot, and it's like, where's the lane? But overall, when you settle into that groove, it's a lot of fun. They've done a nice job with the paving. It is pretty smooth, and I think it helped. I mean, Scott did a great job at the test in April, and so coming back, the Novo Nordisk car was pretty quick out of the gun. I just had to get used to it. It took me a couple of sessions to get comfortable and, like you said, find my marks and settle into that rhythm.
We know you got a quick turnaround. We'll talk to you in qualifying.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Charlie Kimball, second quick here in practice at Texas, guys.
Good stuff, Brad Gilly. Appreciate it so much. Scott Dixon, again, quickest, 2:23.422, 2:21.8 for Charlie Kimball, who you just heard from. Rossi at 2:21.317. Ray Hall and Andretti, the top 5. Sato, Carpenter, Power, Kanan, Newgarden, the top 10. Aloshin, Pagenaud, Castroneves, Chilton, and Hildebrand, the top 15. Vautier, 16th quick, subbing for Sebastian Bourdais this weekend of the 18th. Ryan Hunter-Ray, Munoz, Jones, Hinchcliffe, 20th quick. Gabby Chavez with Harding Racing. The 88 cars here this weekend. Connor Daly, 22nd quick. And again, the range, 223.422. Daly at 216.059. Again, don't forget, we'll go qualifying 3:15 local, 4:15 Eastern. And then a final 30-minute warm-up session tonight, 5:45 local. That's 6:45 Eastern. Again, happy to have Brad Gilly with us this weekend. Great job on pit road, along with Jake Query for Nick Yeoman in the booth. Our on-site engineer and producer is Rick Evans. The director of the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network is Wally Levitt. I'm Mark Jane. So long for now from Texas Motor Speedway.
This is the Verizon IndyCar Series on the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network.
A.J. Foyt down the main straightaway. The checkered flag is out. A.J.'s hand in the air. He is the winner. A.J. Foyt at Indianapolis has won his 4th 500-mile race. A.J. Foyt, our winner. The flag will fly now for Tom Sneva and then for Al Unser. We will be talking with all of these drivers in just a moment. Lou Palmer is in victory lane as A.J. Foyt takes now his victory lap around the 2.5 miles of Indianapolis. A record-breaking end to a record-breaking month. A.J. Foyt, the 4th win at Indianapolis. A month that saw the 200-mile-an-hour barrier broken, not just in the practice where it is unofficial, but in the qualifying by Tom Sneva, our second-place car at the moment. And then, too, the first woman to enter, to qualify, and to compete in a 500.
Stay tuned for more on IndyCar Radio.
A white flag to Tom Sneva with a 10-second lead. Starts his last 2.5 miles.
Sneva, age 34, from Spokane, Washington, on his way to his first 500-mile victory, Doug.
And the fans on their feet in turn number 2, waving their hats, waving their scarves, whatever they've got, sending him up the backstretch.
By here, they're doing the same thing. Everyone frantically and happily waving as he approaches turn 3.
The hats are off, the hands are up. Tom Sneva, a half a lap to his first Indianapolis 500 victory. He could coast almost from here. He's in 4th.
The 67th running of the Indianapolis 500 is about to be capped off. To call the winner, here is the voice of the 500, Paul Page.
The Texaco star, Tom Sneva, screams for the line, the double checkered flag, and Tom Sneva has won the Indianapolis 500, his first victory ever at Indianapolis.
Stay tuned for more on IndyCar Radio. This is IndyCar Radio on the IMS Radio Network.
And there is the white flag for number 3, John Rutherford. Pick it up, Ron Carroll.
Okay, Sid, and here he comes right now from that number 25th position in the starting field. Johnny Rutherford wins, or is about to win, his first 500 over to Howdy Bell in turn 2.
I'm really happy for Johnny and Betty because they're great people, and he likes homemade strawberry ice cream, incidentally, as he heads up the backstretch to Jerry Baker.
He just now goes past us, Howdy, heading in toward number 3, and as you say, one super guy apparently off to the best win of his career. Doug?
The crowd on its feet, waving their hats, waving their arms, as the red, white, blue helmet of Johnny Rutherford and the bright orange car goes streaking by, over into turn number 4. Here's Jim Shelton.
Handsome driver, winning smile, and Johnny Rutherford. And here to call the winner is the voice of the 500, Sid Collins.
And here's the checkered flag for Johnny Rutherford, winner of the 1974 Indianapolis 500-mile race.
From Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth, Texas, this is the Verizon IndyCar Series on the Advance Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network.
We should have known way back in 1997 when the then IRL made its first visit to the relatively new Texas Motor Speedway that we were embarking on quite a history. Of course, the well-publicized dust-up in Victory Lane, the controversy, a race initially won by Billy Boat, eventually awarded to Ari Lyondike in the altercation with AJ and Ari and others, and since that time, some of the best have won here. Names like Al Unser Jr., Sam Hornish Jr., Tony Kanaan, Elio, Scott Dixon, and others. Other winners include John Paul Jr., guys like Scott Sharp won here, Jill DeFerrin, Scott Goodyear, Mark Dismore, and others. I'm Mark James. Welcome to Texas Motor Speedway. Final 30-minute warm-up session before we go racing under the lights tomorrow night here at Texas Motor Speedway for the Rain Guard Water Steelers 600. And Nick Yeoman joins me high atop the main straightaway. And Nick, so far, so good this weekend. The cars seem to be taking well to the reconfigured Texas Motor Speedway, with the possible exception of maybe the number 5 of James Hinchcliffe. He was very, very direct, very, very honest, and to the point, almost unhinged-like in his assessment of the changes that have been made here at Texas Motor Speedway.
Yeah, some very, very strong comments from the mayor of Hinchtown after qualifying, as he is a tad concerned, Mark, with the resurface and repaved turns 1 and 2 here at Texas Motor Speedway. He pretty much said he thought they killed the racetrack. It's going to be interesting, though. We saw in the opening practice session earlier today that a lot of guys are hugging that white line around the bottom of the racetrack in turns 1 and 2, as this racetrack and that part of the racetrack has been flattened and widened quite a bit. And we saw guys that did try to venture into that second groove, Mark, pay for it quite a bit. They couldn't get runs. They couldn't get side-by-side. But ultimately, if you want to be fast, if you want to race up front, you're going to have to make some adjustments on those race cars, and that's going to be a challenge that these teams are faced with here with 27 minutes to go in this final happy half hour of practice at Texas Motor Speedway.
We anticipate a second groove, a third groove, maybe even a fourth groove through that 1-2 area of the race course.
Yeah, it is super wide. I mean, that's the nice thing is with 20 degrees of banking, it is super wide, and if they start laying down some rubber and they start working that groove up, we're going to see some guys get awful racing.
Well, we want to share with you the thoughts and impressions of these drivers. Now, mind you, these are post-qualifying, and some of them before their positions were actually set. They're all in the cars now, but this was from our qualifying show a couple of hours ago. We're happy to have with us this weekend, lives here, a former employee of this racetrack. You hear him often on the Performance Racing Network and on his show and on Sirius and XM, and also works every year with us here, and also we get together with the folks at PRN, work the Brickyard 400. Brad Gilley joins us this weekend, and he caught up with Tony Kanaan, who ended up fourth in the qualifying order once qualifying had completed.
Amazingly fast lap. Question is, Tony, is it going to be the fastest?
I don't know. I mean, I have two teammates that are still got to qualify. It was a good lap. I mean, that's all we had. So, now it is what it is. We've done what we had to do. Let's see what Dixon's going to do, and Charlie as well. They have good cars, same as mine. So, track looks like it's getting a little better every time, a little bit more rubber down. So we'll see.
You've been racing here a long time. Won here in 2004. Does it feel like a completely new racetrack?
Oh yeah, it's a brand new racetrack. A completely different turn one, and a lot tighter corner. So we'll see. It's okay. I like the old Texas anyway, but we'll see what's going to happen.
Outside of row number 2 for Tony Kanaan, and he didn't really give the changes a ringing endorsement, saying he liked the old Texas. Again, a former winner here. He's led a lot of laps here, even though he has just the one win, but I still think that the Ganassi Racing Stable unloaded awfully fast here at Texas Motor Speedway. Nick.
Yeah, what a qualifying session for Chip's bunch. Charlie Kimball grabs his first career pole. Scott Dixon was second fastest. He'll start to the outside of the front row. Tony Kanaan was fourth. Max Chilton had a good run as well. So, Mark, it was a great qualifying session for Ganassi. Great qualifying session for Honda as well, as they took the top 8 spots in qualifying earlier today.
A couple of teams that struggled, maybe a bit of a surprise. Joseph Newgarden rolls off on the inside of row number 9. Marco Andretti just in front of him in row number 8. We mentioned James Hinchcliffe. He's on the outside of row number 8. Ed Carpenter, J.R. Hildebrand. Thought maybe we'd see a little more speed out of them. Carpenter, the outside of row number 7. Hildebrand, outside of row number 9. A rough afternoon for A.J. Foyt Racing. Connor Daly qualified on the inside of row number 11. And Jake Query, Carlos Munoz will roll off in the 22nd starting position. He did not attempt a qualifying run.
Matter of fact, Mark, we're about to hear right now. That's the sound of Carlos Munoz leaving in this practice session in car number 14. The issue was this. They simply found something in the car that they wanted to make a change, but they didn't get it out to the line by the deadline. And so IndyCar did not allow Carlos Munoz to make that qualifying attempt. Larry Foyt told me he thinks and hopes, of course, that they got the issue settled, but they simply missed the time in line. When it was time for him to go, he was simply not there. As a result, Carlos Munoz did not get an opportunity to qualify this track.
About you're going to warm half-hour practice. Guys getting racy, running side by side, running in some packs, getting some work done, and it doesn't look like pit lane is very busy as guys starting to pound out the laps. Mark Pagano the fastest, and he's turned the most laps so far, 24 here in this session.
Let's talk about it. We mentioned Tristan Vautier was P2. He's fallen to P3 as Simon Pagano goes to top of timing and scoring. I don't think you really can't say enough about the job that that engineering staff has done at Dale Coyne Racing to be able to put a driver into the race car that hasn't been in a Verizon IndyCar Series car in quite some time. And mind you, Tristan Vautier is a quality driver for sure, and he has been in other forms of motorsports, sports cars and whatnot. But boy, to come here and lay down a lap like he did and qualify the inside of row 3, that tells you just what Tristan Vautier told you after qualifying, that they unloaded with a pretty good race car here.
Yeah, Craig Hampson, the engineer on that car, Olivier Boisson, they brought him in as well to work on that car to bring the whole gang back together to work with Sebastian Bourdais. And obviously the misfortunate injury during the qualifying accident at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has left Dale Coyne in a scrambling position. Esteban Gutierrez, I thought, did a pretty good job a week ago in Detroit filling in. He didn't get a chance to test on an ovals and therefore wasn't cleared, so Dale Coyne put in the position to fill that seat here at Texas. And Tristan Vautier's done a nice job, and as you mentioned, Mark, backed it up in qualifying, showing some great speed. And in qualifying on these ovals, here or at Indianapolis, I think a lot of the credit goes to the team, Mark, because it's that engineering staff that sets these cars up. And, boy, Dale Coyne's teams have been awful fast on the oval, but we're seeing Tristan Vautier with his hands full right now.
The changes to this race course necessitated a change in the compound that Firestone put together in terms of the tires for this weekend. Earlier today, our Brad Gilley caught up with the engineer from Firestone, Kara Adams, and find out more about the Firestone Firehawks they brought here to Texas Motor Speedway this weekend.
The chief engineer with Firestone Tires, Kara Adams, and we know the teams have a big challenge coming here with the newly configured and paved racetrack, but also the tire manufacturer Firestone as well. What all has gone into the development of this tire for this weekend, Kara?
Sure, we were here a couple of months ago with the whole cell series, and we actually did a tire test on the second day with a new service. So we have both the change in making and then the change of pavement, so we were able to test a few different tire constructions and configurations. We brought back a left side that's pretty similar to Indianapolis. It's got the Indianapolis stagger, so it's a larger right rear size, and it's a smaller overall stagger, about 0.33 inches between the outside right rear tire and the inside left tire. That'll help move some of the work to the right front of this tire, so it'll help with the car handling around the course. We also brought a slightly reduced gauge right side, so it'll help with heat.
I know a lot of people would hope for some tire degradation over the course of a run, but when it comes to a brand new, really smooth racetrack, that can always be a huge challenge. What is the challenge for Firestone on that?
So the interesting thing about this new speedway is every construction and every tread compound we brought had almost no tire degradation. So we might see a little bit difference this year. We might see the cars a little bit closer together as far as lap times. They're all going to be pretty even over a stint. So it's really how teams were able to use their setup to take care of that.
And how many laps do you really need to see? Will this practice session teach you a whole lot about what's actually happening now here under race conditions?
Yeah, hopefully we get some long runs. Looking at the car setups, it looks like a lot of them have qualifying trim set up. So it'll be interesting. So hopefully we'll see some good laps here.
Nick Yeoman, Tristan Vautier, for one, is getting his money's worth. We saw a thread-the-needle move going into turn number 3 that is not indicative of someone who hasn't been in a race car of this kind in a while.
Mark, these boys are scaring me a little bit here in this final happy hour because they are mixing it up. Tony Kanaan roaring down the front straightaway, looking to the inside of Gabby Chavez going into turn number 1. You mentioned Vautier going inside, going outside, mixing it up big time. Got a pack exiting turn 2, Mark, of about 8 to 10 cars, mixing it up as Kanaan's looking to the inside to get around Pagano.
Yep, Newgarden is in that bunch running together. We look a little further back and we see Hinch running to the high side of Ryan Hunter-Ray. He lifts a little bit off of turn number 4. McKella Lotion is right there, and we have a yellow for debris and a big chunk just barely out of the groove up high in turn 4, but some of them are running up there. So race control doing the wise thing and throwing the yellow. Well, Scott Dixon, sore foot and all, had a really good qualifying run, set on pole for a while, but ultimately he lost that to his teammate Charlie Kimball. Scott Dixon will roll off on the outside of row number 1 for tomorrow night's race. Our Nick Yeoman caught up with Scott Dixon after qualifying.
7 winners in 8 races. You and TK are not one of them yet in 2017, but boy, it's a good sign for you guys so far.
Yeah, I think both NTT data cars have been strong, and actually all 4 Ganassi cars have been strong today, earlier in the practice. It'd be nice to lock out the front row with NTT data cars, especially in their backyard. But well, we'll see how it plays out. I know Charlie and both Max are coming up later. They're going to be very strong too. They were fast this morning. But as we all know too, qualifying doesn't mean too much here in Texas. So if we can be at the front and in the hunt in the last sort of 10 laps, I think we'll have a good shot.
You can't take a 700 horsepower IndyCar out on the road, but you can take the tires. The new Firehawk high-performance tires from Firestone are built with racing-inspired technology and have better wet and dry handling than ever before. Now the only thing missing is a pit crew.
Hi, Dad.
Well, that's a start. Find your perfect Firehawk performance tire at your local Firestone retailer. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
Texas Motor Speedway, 13 minutes remaining in this final tune-up before we go racing tomorrow night. Here at Texas Motor Speedway, the Rain Guard Water Sealers 600. Winner a year ago, Graham Rahal. Let's talk about momentum, Nick Yeoman. 2 guys, I think, that have it. Most assuredly, the Indy 500 champion, Takuma Sato, had a really good weekend at Detroit. Was a pole sitter there. Graham Rahal swept the weekend going back-to-back. But, in all honesty, we talk about those guys, but a couple of guys that have been a model of consistency find themselves at the top of the points heap, or near the top of the points heap, would be Elio Castro-Neves and Scott Dixon.
Yeah, Elio and Scott both have really, really good seasons, have yet to visit victory lane, but that's how you win championships, Mark. If you're consistent week in, week out, you score the points, you take those bad days and make them mediocre days, that's oftentimes how you find yourself going into the final race in Sonoma with at least a chance to win a championship. But those two have been very consistent. But as you mentioned, some guys really coming on strong. Graham Rahal's just tremendous weekend in Detroit. Then I even asked Takuma Sato if he believed in the big momentum, and he said absolutely. That hard work pays off, and it has worked into a great season so far for Takuma Sato, winning the Indianapolis 500. And as you mentioned, Mark, he's stormed all the way to the top 5 in points.
Top 7, Nick, separated by 57 points. Let's add Power is 70 back. We know how quickly he could get hot and close the gap. Tony Kanaan, 80 points back. And you go back to the last driver in the top 10, James Hinchcliffe, is, in fact, to find someone more than 100 points back, you got to go back to 13th. Ryan Hunter-Reay, 120 back. So this thing is far from being decided, and it doesn't look like early on anyway that anyone is separating themselves from the pack.
Yeah, 7 winners in 8 races. That's a good point. As soon as you see a guy go out and have a dominant run, say like Joseph Newgarden goes and finishes, and wins the race at Barber Motorsports Park and puts Team Penske in victory lane for the first time of the season, you think, okay, maybe they'll get started. And then Newgarden's kind of had some up and down runs. Same with Simon Pagenaud, our defending Verizon IndyCar Series champion, has not been able to necessarily string together the race wins like he did at the beginning of last year that propelled him to a championship. So I think that's healthy, Mark. I think it's pretty strong to say that every time you come to the racetrack, you don't know who's going to win. You don't know who's going to claim these championships. And I think it's going to make this second half of the season very entertaining for us to call and very entertaining for Verizon IndyCar fans.
I know there are some tests scheduled, but let's face it, going back to April 23rd, the teams and the drivers have been on quite a grind. Barber, the 23rd, Phoenix, the 29th, Grand Prix, May the 13th. Then we had 2 days of qualifying of the 500, all those days of practice. Then we had the Indy 500. Then we went from there to Detroit. Now we're at Texas. And as I said, I know testing is in the offing, but maybe a little bit of a chance to catch your breath and regroup a little bit, because we don't go racing again until the 25th of June at Road America.
Yeah, and we do. We hit that rhythm section of the summer where, you brought up Will Power's name. Will's, 8th in points right now, 70 markers back. But it seems like, Mark, every year when we hit that middle summer stretch, somebody gets hot. Somebody starts stringing together victories and really puts themselves at the top of the championship standings as a favorite. But I think the good news is, as we've talked about, with really the top 12 separated by 99 points, anybody has that opportunity to really stake their claim as the favorite.
We talked about the top 10. Let's look from 10 through, say, 22nd, if you will. Maybe taking Ed Carpenter out of the equation because, of course, he's a part-timer, ovals only. Anyone you're surprised to see mired back farther than 10th that you maybe expected to have a little better season?
Well, the name that jumps off the page is Ryan Hunter-Reay because he is a former champion of the Verizon IndyCar Series, so that's been very frustrating for him. Charlie Kimball's another one. Our pole sitter for Saturday night's race is buried all the way down in 19th place, and he's had some really rough weekends, Mark, as the green flag comes back out with just under 10 minutes to go in this practice session. But I think Hunter-Reay's the one that you can chalk it up to having a rough season so far. Not his fault, though, Mark. He very easily could have won the race in Long Beach. I think he very could have easily won the race at the Indianapolis 500. I mean, he had, hands down, one of the top 2 or 3 cars before that engine expired. But, man, that's racing for you. Hunter-Reay just hasn't been able to find the results, Mark, and that's why he finds himself 13th in points, 120 markers back of Scott Dixon.
The past couple of weekends, Nick, it's been nice seeing the field bump up a bit to 22. We had Oriol Servia at Detroit. And great to see Harding Racing on the grid here this weekend.
Yeah, that's a cool story. Mike Harding has decided to run a couple additional races. They got a chance to test here with Gabby Chavez before the Indianapolis 500, so they had a little bit of data coming into this weekend. Going to run one other additional race this year as well, I believe at Pocono, so that's going to be a lot of fun to see. And their plans, Mark, again, all of those are tentative, and we'll see if it works out. But Mike Harding and Larry Curry and that bunch, they want to go full-time in 2018, and I think that'd be awful cool for all of us that support this series.
Scott Dixon, 223 and change. We see Scott Dixon go to the high side of Mikel Alosian. thought they would go side by side through 1 and 2. They decide not to do that. There's a pack of about 5 cars running behind them. The car in the high groove has to lift a little bit. That allows those to the bottom of the racetrack to slip by him, and we see a couple of packs of 2x2s coming toward us. Chavez leads the way, along with the Lotion. Scott Dixon, Elio, Will Power running together. Marco is trying to chase down Ryan Hunter-Ray. So certainly no question, Nick, as we now see James Hinchcliffe and Max Chilton running together at the exit of turn number 1. They're trying to gather all the info they can right now on how these cars are going to run in traffic.
Let's go to pit lane, and Jake Query, you've got a note here at Texas Motor Speedway.
Yeah, Mark just said it exactly right, Mark. And guys, in talking to a couple of the different strategists in between sessions, between qualifying and now, it's very easy, myself included, to look up at the speeds in this session and think to yourself, well, why is this car slower? Or, wow, this car's really fast. But it's not necessarily completely telling as to what is in each respective car, because the primary concern for many of these drivers, not concern, I guess, but more so simply focus, is exactly what Mark just said. Not necessarily going out to see how fast your car is, but rather to find somebody, whether it be a teammate or simply another trusted driver, to be able to get some laps, find out how that car is going to respond in traffic, and more importantly, find out exactly how that number 2 or 3 groove is for your car and whether or not it's something you're going to be comfortable going with. Because the last thing anybody wants to do, several were telling me, is to go into, let's say, turn number 1 or 2 and get kind of stuck to the outside or in that middle groove, and all of a sudden the freight train starts passing by.
Nick, I've watched Elio and Gabby Chavez for the past couple of laps run side by side together, and I will say this. It doesn't appear as though that Elio is able to make that pass stick to the high side. Now, through 1 and 2, he did that time, I think, because of the run that he got off of turn number 4 and down the main straightaway.
Here's what I've gathered, Mark, in my impressions of this new resurface and repave here at Texas Motor Speedway. I'm obviously not a race car driver, but visually what I can see up here from the booth, it's very hard to go side by side in turns 1 and 2. If you're stuck on the outside, that car washes up the racetrack so much. Exiting turn 2, we see Will Power stuck on the outside. He's going to lose about 4 or 5 car lengths back to Marco Andretti. You lose a ton of ground, but I've also seen, Mark, that even when they go single file and it's follow the leader on the bottom of the racetrack through 1 and 2, it's so hard for these drivers to hit their marks because it's a completely resurfaced racetrack that I think a lot of guys are missing it. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of guys get great runs out of turn 2 down the back straightaway. And, Mark, it's set up some unbelievable side-by-side action down the back stretch and into turn 3.
5 minutes left in this session, and I tell you what, they are mixing it up plenty off of turn number 2. There were 3 cars that looked to slow a little bit upon the exit of turn number 2. A car went through 1 and 2 full bore, gaining a little bit of momentum. That was the 21 car of J.R. Hildebrand. He had to split about 3 cars once he slid down the banking of the exit of turn number 2. We saw Gabby Chavez a couple of laps ago. We saw the issues Elio had with him. He went side by side with Ryan Hunter-Ray into turn number 2. And as you mentioned, Nick, he had to lift a little bit. Now he's got his rear view mirrors full of one of the Penske cars. That's the car of Simon Pagenaud. Pagenaud had to lift a little bit, and all of a sudden that stacks up about 6 cars behind Gabby Chavez off of turn number 2.
And right behind them, it's Ryan Hunter-Ray and Joseph Newgarden. Been watching Newgarden. He's been trying to work that outside groove through turns 3 and 4. In fact, he's going to take that hum by Verizon Chevrolet to the outside groove to try to get a run on Ryan Hunter-Ray. He will. And right ahead of them, Mark, it's Pagenaud jumping to the outside of Chavez again.
Connor Daly is trying the high groove, trying to make it work through 1 and 2. That time he lifts a little bit, lets the car get to the bottom of the racetrack, but it just doesn't like it there. The car doesn't seem to be comfortable to the high side either. Marco Andretti works his way around Connor Daly now into turn number 3.
Boy, Joseph Newgarden has that car pinned to the outside around Ryan Hunter-Ray, and it's a stacked up 4 or 5 car situation, Mark. Going to have to do a little lifting getting into turn 1. Newgarden had to jump way out of the throttle and to avoid running into the back of Chavez into 1.
And Joseph thought about testing that third groove and decided wiser of it. At the midway point of the back straightaway, he slips around Gabby Chavez, and now he'll set sail for the 2 cars running in front of him. Mikel Alonso, one of those benefiting from clean green racetrack right now. Pagano and Elio Castro-Neves working together just in front of Joseph Newgarden. Those guys are nose to tail at the exit of 2.
Partner, if this is a preview of what you and Jake Quay are going to get to call tomorrow night, I'm a little jealous because I think we might have a pretty good show in store as we've got about 15 cars, Mark, in turns 3 and 4 right now. It's Simon Pagano leading that train with his teammate Elio Castro-Neves mixing it up. Elio will pop to the outside to try to get around Simon.
Going to try the high groove. They'll stay side by side. Pagano with a bit of an advantage at the exit of turn number 2. The exit of the banking doesn't really help Elio, but now all of a sudden, Nick, he looks strong coming through 3 and 4.
Yeah, see, that's what we've seen. Even with maybe that one groove tendency through turns 1 and 2, if you get a good run out of 2, you can carry it down the back stretch and through 3 and 4. Elio going to pop to the outside. They're glued together, Mark, into turn 1.
Newgarden is sitting right there waiting on that to sort itself out. It finally does, and now all of a sudden Marco Andretti decides he wants to jump in the middle of that fray. So 4 cars beating and banging on one another, and they come upon the car of Ryan Hunter-Reay off of turn number 4.
I was going to say, make it 5 as Hunter-Reay keeps that car to the inside. Pagano gets around. So does Elio. So does Marco. Newgarden will pop to the outside. Mark, nope, he'll fall back in line as those 5 cars roar out of turn 2.
Well, I think he was afraid Ryan Hunter-Reay was going to wash up the racetrack a little bit and thought he would lift, and he lost all kind of momentum to the point to where I believe that's Gabby Chavez that pulled up alongside of him. So another thing we've learned, Nick, if you lift, and you said it earlier, at all, you're going to lose a ton of momentum and thus a ton of track position.
Yeah, that's that rubber banding effect, almost that we kind of see at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway where, yeah, if you lift, someone's going to be on you in a hurry. And so far, Mark, it's made for some tremendous action here with just a minute and a half to go in this final practice session.
If you have an ill-handling race car tomorrow, the disparity right now, those near the bottom, Chilton, Munoz, Chavez, between 216 and 218, with the guys at the front of the field running speeds like Ed Carpenter and Scott Dixon at 224 and 223, they're going to come upon traffic very, very soon as long as we get a good green flag run.
Just 1 minute to go in the practice session, and Ryan Hunter-Reay going to follow Marco Andretti underneath Simon Pagano into turn number 3. And, Mark, you know, we heard from Kara Adams from Firestone talk about how with this new repave, we're not going to see as much tire degradation. So that's another good point. If you can nail the setup, you may be good for a long run here at Texas.
Newgarden works on Pagano. He'll do so a half a groove higher, or Pagano working on Newgarden, we should say. Ryan Hunter-Reay runs in front of both of them as the time continues to wind down. 25 seconds remaining. Marco Andretti with a strong move to the bottom of the racetrack. That is an area of the course that his car seems to be very, very comfortable. He slips right in front of Elio Castro-Neves in turn number 1.
Boy, both of those guys badly need a win. It's been since 2014 for Elio Castro-Neves, been even longer for Marco Andretti. Both of those drivers, Mark, as they set up for turn 3, could really use a trip to the Texas victory lane.
Looking for the starter, Tom Hansing, to wave the checkered flag. He will do just that. And so as the checkers fall, Ed Carpenter is P1 at 224.682. Dixon, Rossi, Hildebrand, Pagano, Castro-Neves, Jones, Vautier, Newgarden, and Alosh in the top 10. Well, Charlie Kimball, believe it or not, first career pole at Texas Motor Speedway. Very happy Charlie Kimball visited with Nick Yeoman after he was awarded P1.
Career pole number 1 for Charlie Kimball. Big celebration down here with his entire Ganassi crew, and they were really fired up to see the first career pole for Charlie Kimball. And that waiting process, that didn't look like it was a lot of fun, but man, what a fast race car you've got.
Yeah, fortunately we didn't have to wait too long. You know, I knew my teammate Max was probably the best shot, at least left once we got through those first couple after I got out of the car. I didn't really know it was good enough until I got on the radio and they said, yeah, that's P1. So I know that the first lap I had some issues with the car. The balance wasn't quite the way I wanted, and make some adjustments to the tools. But honestly, all credit to the Novo Nordisk Chip Ganassi Racing guys and all 4 Chip Ganassi Racing teams working together to make sure that I think we've got, 3 of the top 4 spots. That's a pretty solid front 2 rows for us.
How big of a shot in the arm is this for your season in particular?
It's fantastic. When we haven't had bad luck, we've had no luck. So it's nice to come out, have a solid start. I felt really good coming into this weekend. There was something about it. It had a good test here in April. Scott did a really nice job working on the car, and all the engineers did such a good job preparing. You know, Todd, in practice, we had a condensed schedule, and we hit the highlights on setup changes and then got into qual running and got ready to go for today.
Tomorrow night's Rain Guard Water Sealers 600, the starting lineup. Row number 11, Connor Daly and Carlos Munoz. Row 10, Ed Jones and Gabby Chavez. At row number 9, Joseph Newgarden and J.R. Hildebrand. Row 8, Marco Andretti and James Hinchcliffe. Row number 7, Ryan Hunter-Ray and Ed Carpenter. In row 6, Graham Rahal, Simon Pagino. Row 5, Will Power and Elio Castro-Neves. In row number 4, Mikel Aloshin and Takuma Sato. Row number 3, Tristan Vautier and Max Chilton. In row 2, Alexander Rossi and Tony Canan. On the outside of row number 1, Scott Dixon. You just heard from him, your pole sitter, Charlie Kimball. Hope you'll join us at 7 Central, 8 Eastern tomorrow night for flag-to-flag coverage of the Rain Guard Water Sealers 600 here at Texas Motor Speedway. The director of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network and the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network is Wally Levitt. On-site engineering and production by Rick Evans. From our Indianapolis studios, master control operations by Chris Pollock. Jake Query was on pit road tonight. For Nick Yeoman, I'm Mark Janes. So long for now from Texas Motor Speedway.
This is the Verizon IndyCar Series on the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio.